Wonder, 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 wonder.
Hey friends, for this episode, I'm excited to share with you that I am joined by someone that I've been wanting to have on the podcast for a while. Anel is so many things. I mean, there's just so much that I just want to share about her. I met her a few years ago. She has a very interesting story of leaving the Mormon church. She was as committed as you could be. She was homeschooling her children, which she still does. But her perspective and the way things have changed in her life in the last 5 years has been so dramatic that I wanted her on the show to tell us a little bit about that journey and what it's meant for her and what it all means today, now in 2025. She's progressed and evolved in so many ways, and just someone who's just a breath of fresh air in this world in the way that just feeling super liberated and just joyful for the opportunities to do things again and to live life at our own terms. So I hope you enjoy it and let me know what you think. Enjoy. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm excited. I know the last time you asked me to have this conversation, I wasn't quite ready for it yet, but I'm
I
there now.
know. I know. And I was thinking about like every single year that went by, I'm like, I wonder if she's ready to talk about it. Because it's been like, I think it's been like 5 years that I've been waiting on this interview
Hmm.
with you.
Yeah, it has.
And I was like, maybe we could do it anonymous. I mean, I don't know. I was thinking of all these ideas, like how to do it so that you can come on, because I think your story is just so fascinating. And even
Thank
though we
you.
haven't met in person, we were both part of the Latina bloggers group, the Houston Latina bloggers group.
Yeah.
You did photography for some of the girls there. I remember you sharing your photography. I think that was the first thing that I remember about you. Was it you did photography and you did a few brand sessions with some of the girls,
Hmm.
maybe with Connie? I'm not
Yeah.
sure. I don't know if it was her or maybe it was some another person. Do you remember
Yeah.
those days?
I started out working with Connie, and then I also worked with Melanie. I don't know if she's still with Latina bloggers, and then Millie,
Mm-hmm.
and a little bit with Victoria Garcia, like collaborating on stuff. And there were a few other girls that I worked with in the group.
Yeah, Victoria became like a best friend of mine, and I met her through the group too. She had offered to do some photography for my store when I had the store, and I
Hmm.
remember telling her, like, she called me, and I'm like, girl, I love that you have the balls to call somebody and ask them, hey, can we get work together? Because a lot of people don't do that. But I will tell you,
Yeah.
I'm a little bit of a control freak. She was like, it's fine. I can work with control freaks. I'm like, okay, good. That was like the first thing I told her. So I'm not trying to scare you, but I am a little bit of a control freak. So I know.
I met her
Yeah, tell
a
me.
few years back.
Uh-huh.
And like the first time we met up for coffee, and she had just had her little girl.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was when she first had her. And it was just really nice getting to know her and, connecting with someone in the industry, because I feel like it within blogging and photography, it can be kind of like a catty industry. So
Yeah.
it's nice to have that network of other Latinas to connect with.
Yeah, I discovered through the group so many great people. I'm still friends with a lot of them. They would come in and do influencer events for me or, blog for me or model for me. And I
Hmm.
learned so much from them too. Like I learned a lot from the girls that would come in and do, um influencer marketing for me. So it was great. I loved it. It was a great event. Are you still doing photography?
I am getting back to it. I took a really long break after I had my fourth kid,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm just not getting back to it. Except I used to do a lot of like branding stuff, commercial photography, and now I'm moving away from that and going toward like family mostly,
Okay. I
that kind of
wanna
stuff.
I want a giveaway. You were supposed to do my photography, but then COVID happened and then we never got to.
Oh no! Well, we could
Yeah,
totally still do it.
yeah, I would love
We
it.
should. We
I would love
should.
it. Now I have to beg my child, my son, to do my photography for me.
Oh
That-
my gosh, I love seeing his work and how you guys have supported him with his production stuff and his videography. It's amazing.
Yeah, yeah. And we, like, my husband and I are super left-brain people. We're really not right-brained at all. And so to have a kid that was super, like, right-brained was just very hard for us to kind of like wrap our heads around it because oh my
Uh-huh.
gosh, it's just so different to raise a kid who's so creative. And we were like, nope, no, no, you got to go to college, you got to do this, you know, the whole traditional thing. And that kid was like, Mom,
Yeah.
I hate school. I can't do well in school. If you, I will, you'll torture me, Mom, if you send me to school, you send me to college. So his dad was like, okay, well then it's up to you to figure out how you're going to get this photography thing going, how you're going to get your videos. And that kid started doing a bunch of free videos all by himself, just asking people to do work for them and work for them and work for them. And one thing led to another. And now he's going to go work in LA.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Congrats.
He found
So
himself a
cool.
manager out there, and so he's gonna be doing that. So I'm super proud of that kid. But you know, that's why I wanted to reach out to you because you know the way that I also got to know a little bit more about you is because you homeschool your kids.
Hmm.
How long have you been homeschooling your kids?
We just wrapped up our 12th year.
12?
So so basically since my
Wow,
oldest started first grade.
really? And I'm the opposite. I'm a teacher myself, but I'm like, go to school, dude. Bye bye.
Yeah, no, I hear you.
Completely different. Yeah, but I used to do a lot of schooling here at home with them because when there was test time, I used to say, "There's
Mhm.
no way you're the child of a teacher and you're gonna do bad on a test."
Uh-huh.
So, what got you started into that? What motivated you to do
With
homeschool?
homeschooling, so my oldest did try public school. He went for kindergarten and it just didn't really work out with his personality. He was at the time like a very quiet, shy kid and kind of got lost between the cracks, you know. And I think the thing that really, well, he was having like some bullying issues, one.
Hmm.
And then
Hmm.
the thing that really did it for me was at his kindergarten graduation, his teacher could not pronounce his name.
What is
We
his name?
also, Nathaniel,
Oh, okay.
and he also goes by Nate.
Mm,
So
okay.
she just like totally butchered his first and last name. And well, I guess, you know, our last name is kind of unique. Um, but I felt like you've had all year to interact
Yeah.
with him and you
Yeah.
can't even learn his name.
Yeah.
And that day we had sent him to school in like the cute little like button-up shirt and a little bow tie for his kinder graduation. And then when he goes up on stage, he's like in shorts and a t-shirt in a
Hmm.
completely different outfit. So I was like, what happened? Well, it turns out he had walked out of class, gone and gotten changed, and the teacher never noticed.
Yeah.
When I asked her about it, she said, well, there's a lot of kids, and I just can't keep track of them all. And for
Mm.
me, it was like, but these are kindergartners. They're 5 and 6 years old. You know, if you can't keep track of them, I didn't think it was the safest environment at that point. So,
Hmm.
with my teaching background, I decided to give it a try. Initially, it was just going to be temporary, but as the years went on, then my second started homeschooling, and it just got easier
Hmm.
with each year.
Each year got easier. Um, I don't know. Did you ever like go crazy? Because I could go crazy very
Oh,
easily.
yeah,
How did you manage
definitely.
that?
In the beginning, it was very crazy. I struggled a lot with needing to deschool myself
Right.
because in the beginning, I really try to like recreate the classroom environment with them and have rules, and even did the whole, you know, raise your hand to talk to me thing.
Mm-hmm.
And they just were not being receptive to that, you know.
Got it. Yeah.
And I realized it was because they were at home. It was meant to be their safe space, and you know they should have felt comfortable instead of me
Mm-hmm.
trying to mold them into a
Yeah.
classroom environment. And so it took, I think we took about 6 months off of schooling for, that must have been the second year. And instead did a lot of more hands-on stuff, field trips, things of that sort. And that opened my eyes because I saw my kids thriving and being receptive to that kind of learning. And I realized that I needed to kind of toss the workbooks aside and, you know, reconstruct my own education of what it meant to
Mm-hmm.
educate the kids.
And you belong to the Latter-day Saints, to the Mormon Church back then, right?
Yes, I
And I thought
did.
you were doing the homeschooling because of that. Like I kind of like equated it, and maybe it's a dumb idea, but I kind of equated it to sort of like the offshoots of LDS that are very much
Mhm.
more conservative. So I thought that you came from like a sect or like a very conservative sect that didn't allow their children to go to regular public school because they would be, exposed to secular
Mhm.
education. They wouldn't be praying. They wouldn't be doing a lot of the things that I figured. So educate me a little bit on that because I think I had the wrong idea.
So I was actually part of the mainstream LDS religion, but I did incorporate a lot of the religion into their learning, definitely. Like we would do daily devotionals, prayers, even the education that they were receiving at the time
Yeah.
was very much, I try to correlate it with our religion as much as possible, like incorporate the Bible and things like that. And they were even doing a online like group learning, um, that where it was only church members and the educators were church members as well, and that gave me like an hour and a half break, but it was all like the elective courses like PE, music, those kinds of things, but it was all very much faith based. Like whenever they would do PE, Mormons, they have this thing called the Word of Wisdom, where they believe that the body is a temple, and there are a lot of substances and things that are not allowed to consume.
Okay.
Um, Alcohol,
Yeah.
coffee.
Right.
Um,
Because of the caffeine, right? Is that correct? Is it the
yeah,
caffeine?
well, yes,
Well,
it's
what
what
part
we
of the
were. It's what I was told growing up, but
okay.
very recently the church changed that.
Ah,
And Um, yeah, it's one of the things I've struggled with, now that I'm on the outside of seeing how the church's doctrines and revelations
right.
um, come in, and I think as mainstream kind of criticizes certain things about the church, they
Mm-hmm.
then make changes to retain some of the membership, but they call it revelation. And so when my two oldest were little and we were doing the faith-based learning, it was very much, don't drink coffee, don't grow up to be a drug addict, don't try this, don't try that, take care
How,
of your body. And
were you born into it or were
I was.
you were born into it? So your parents converted or were they also born into it?
No, my parents converted. So at the time when they converted, they were living in Mexico, and my dad converted first. My mom was resistant to it in the beginning.
Was it through
um,
missionaries, like through the missionary
yes.
work that they come in? Okay, gotcha.
Yes, yeah. So two young men came knocking to their door and taught them and got them to baptize. They had my oldest sister, she was 4 at the time. And my dad actually was looking for a faith. He grew up Catholic, but not ever attending church.
Hmm.
So he was seeking a community, I guess. And this was kind of the thing that he latched onto. And like I said, my mom did not really want to do it in the beginning because it was just not her tradition. Um, and so she was resistant to it. I think it took her about a year to finally be convinced. And
What
my dad.
what was it about it that your dad really gravitated to? What was it? What particular thing? What was the seed that grew in his brain?
So he came from an abusive background. His
Okay,
father was
gotcha.
abusive and an alcoholic,
Gotcha.
and he was wanting to break that cycle, but did not know how. And um, one of the main things that the church offers is this teaching of eternal families, um, of being sealed and being with your family forever and ever. And so that was the thing that my dad, it appealed to him. And because they're very family centered,
Yeah.
um, that helped him kind of transition away from the life that he grew up with and not wanting to repeat the same cycle. And I think that was mostly what it was. He did has told me that he was looking for community, but outside of what he grew up in,
Gotcha.
because everyone he knew was of a similar background,
Mm-hmm.
and
Are
he
they still
wanted.
in the church, Anel?
Yes, they
They still
are.
are.
They are still believing Mormons. So is my sister.
So you're the only
I
one that left?
No, I have a brother who's younger than I, and he left first.
Okay. So where were you in your life when you left the church? What place were you in your life? Your kids, you had already your all of your kids, or did you, you
I
know?
had I had when I officially left, I had just had my fifth. He was a baby, and COVID was starting to shut things down.
Mm-hmm.
And um, in the beginning, the church went to something called home church,
Mm-hmm.
where they were now encouraging us to have all the rituals that we would do at church, we could now do them at home. And that was kind of the thing that really blew my mind, because
Uh-huh.
before that I was taught that these were really sacred things that you could only do in church. You could only do
Mm-hmm.
these things in the temple, and those weren't things that you could do at home, like the sacrament, blessing of children being done at home. And because COVID happened and church shut down, we were now allowed to do all of those things at home. And so that's when I had been questioning things before that, but that's when I really thought about just walking away from it, because all of a sudden it's okay that we don't attend church.
Yeah. Were you afraid to disappoint your parents?
Oh yeah, definitely, definitely. I mean, I hid it from them for the first 2, maybe 3 years.
Oh, really?
Um, yeah, I didn't think I could talk about it with them. My parents, both of them, serve in the church. My father has had high-ranking callings within the church, and they're very Orthodox Mormons. They're there every week. My mom also weekly attends the temple, which is not church. It's a place where they do secret rituals, for lack of a better phrase.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, and
I've heard of that. Yeah.
she's there weekly. She's very believing. And so in the beginning, I was really afraid to talk with them about it. My sister did know. My sister and I are very close. She is 7 years older than me, and she's a very non-judgmental person. Um, so I really felt comfortable talking with her, and she was very accepting from the beginning. Um, but the conversation with my parents happened in an unplanned way. Um, so about 3 years ago, I was really struggling with my anxiety and had to get back on medication for it. And the conversation, I was visiting my parents. My sister was there. I think we were there for someone's birthday. And somehow the conversation about my anxiety came up, and I told my parents that I was medicated again. My dad is very anti clinical, anti medicine, anti vax.
Is that a church doctrine, or is that like something that's frowned upon in the church? Is that why he felt that way?
It's not doctrine, but yeah, it is frowned upon. Again, it
Okay.
goes back to the word of wisdom. They're, only consume things that God created, and anything man made is not really encouraged.
Yeah, or good for the
But
temple or for the body, which is
right, yeah,
the
but it
temple.
isn't doctrine.
Okay.
It's just cultural, I think,
Right.
within the
Okay.
Mormon church.
Okay.
And so when I mentioned it, my dad offered me a blessing. So it's this special prayer that men who hold the priesthood can
Mm-hmm.
give to heal. They believe that through laying of hands, they can heal a person. And well, I was no longer a believing Mormon, and I refused my dad's offer for a blessing to heal my mental illness. I did not believe that was going to work. So I declined politely, and he insisted, and it was very awkward because he said that, oh, you're rejecting me. I'm your father. I want to do this for you. And I told him, I mean, we can pray. I'll accept that. We can sit here and you can pray for me if you'd like, but I do not want a blessing. I do not want laying of hands because I no longer believe in it. And
Wow. Wow.
and I felt kind of pushed into, talking about it in the moment. And it
Mm-hmm.
was very much a shocker for my parents. My mother began to cry. She, told me how disappointing it was for her.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and my poor sister tried to kind of mediate the conversation and, like, hey, let's not judge her. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but I know that they weren't coming from a place of like hatred or
Yeah.
judgment toward
Yeah.
me. It's they really truly believe in their religion,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
they honestly believe that it's wrong to live outside of it.
Yeah. And then they become afraid of you going to hell or not going into
Oh yeah.
heaven or going into because there's different states of heaven, right? There's different levels
Right.
of getting into
Hmm.
it.
Yeah, there are
I
three
get, I
levels.
get what you're saying. Give me 1 second. I need to go get like a package.
Yeah, of course.
All right. Thank you. All right. They always need me to sign something. All right. So tell me a little bit about like where were you in terms of your relationship with your husband? Was he also starting to have his doubts as well? Like were you guys feeling the same thing at the same time? Or was
um
it kind of a catalyst or was he a catalyst?
I think now I realize my husband was never like fully committed to Mormonism. He did not grow up Mormon. He grew up Catholic, and he converted so that we could get married in the temple because it was one of the requirements. I wanted to get married in the church, and in order to do that, he had to be baptized and
And you
convert.
married young, right, Anel?
Yes, I was
And
19 years old.
and I noticed a lot of women in a lot of Mormon women marry very young and
It
have
is
babies
encouraged.
almost immediately. It's
Oh,
encouraged.
yeah. It is encouraged by the church to marry as young as possible. Find your eternal companion, is what they teach us, and have children right away because the belief is that there are spirit children of God waiting in heaven to be born into bodies, and that it is our
Oh,
sacred duty to bring those spirits into the world.
oh, interesting. I've always wondered why they had so many babies so young and so early.
Yeah, it's very encouraged by the church. So, um,
But
like you
then I
say, you've noticed it.
But and I also noticed that a lot of them get divorced very young because I don't think they get to know each other very well or get to
Not
know
at
the
all.
person they're marrying for very, very long.
Yep.
Usually it's very short of a dating period, if it even is called a date.
Yes. Yes.
Something
I
like
know
that.
people, I know LDS people who dated for 3 months and then got married. Or I do know somebody that dated for 1 month and then was engaged and got married. And
Wow.
yeah, the divorce rate is very high. Although it is discouraged, divorce is not encouraged within the church, but like you say, a lot of people do not know each other well. And I think that marrying very young, um, many of us are not emotionally prepared for what marriage truly means.
Mm-hmm.
And for me and my husband, that was definitely the case. I was 19, he was 20. I was 21 by the time I had my first kid.
Mm-hmm.
And I was not ready for it emotionally or mentally. It
Mm-hmm.
was it was hard. It put a very big strain on our marriage because there's a very idealistic idea of what marriage is supposed to be. You know, you're going to get married, you're going to have kids, you're going to be a housewife. This is very much the life plan that women or young girls within the church are taught to
Mm-hmm.
follow.
Mm-hmm.
But there's no time for self-development, self-care. You're also, while being young, a young in a young marriage, and young parents are also expected to serve in callings in the church and be committed to that. Um,
So you're having
it-
not only expectations or responsibilities within the family, but you have responsibilities in the church family, in that community. So you're being pulled in many different directions. So not only are you trying to raise yourself because you are young, you're raising babies, you're maintaining a relationship, a husband-wife relationship, right? So that's also happening. You're probably also taking care of your parents because a lot of them don't know the language or maybe they're new to the country, right? So in your own education, like where does that go? Like where do you educate yourself? Like at 19 years old, are you going to college?
at 19 years old, me myself, I was done with a 2-year degree and working in a school.
Okay.
Um, when I got married, I was a teacher's assistant and then taught in a classroom after that for a few more
Okay.
years.
Wow.
But so young women is what they're called. Young girls 12 to or 11 now, 11 to 18 years old within
Mm-hmm.
church are called young women, and I don't know now because I haven't attended in a long time, but when I was a teenager, we used to have something called personal progress where it's a little book. Oh, I wish I had one handy. It's a little book that has the young women values, and these values each have different goals or achievements that you're supposed to complete before you turn 18.
Oh,
And so there is a section called
uh-huh.
Divine Nature where you get to know yourself a little bit, but people are kind of rushed through the program. So the part where you're encouraged to figure out what career you want, or think about yourself and self-love, those are very rushed. There are some classes, or there were back in my day, some classes about self-worth and things like that. But
Mm-hmm.
like I said, they're very brief.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of it is focused on motherhood, becoming a
Okay.
wife.
Mm-hmm.
That that is Mormon women aren't discouraged from having a career, but they are encouraged to put family first,
Yeah,
to
yeah. So
to
it
be a
kind of
mother first.
by de facto, you're being discouraged
Ye-
to pursue higher
Yes.
education. Wow. So
Yeah.
in 2020, you started having these doubts. You started thinking, I don't know if I want to continue this. Like, what was that moment that you said, okay, I'm done. I'm just not doing this anymore. I don't care if my parents are just gonna, disown me. I don't know, shun me. What made you get to that place?
Honestly, like church being shut down and being able to breathe,
Mm-hmm.
not having that responsibility. I served in the youth ministry, and so having that break was allowed me to actually think about where I was at in life and do I want to keep doing this? And I realized I didn't, because I'd gotten my own time back, and
Mm-hmm.
was because everything was shut down with COVID. I was actually spending time with my husband and my kids and having time for myself. And I realized that the grass was greener on the other side. and
Wow.
and we did very briefly return to church when meetings resumed.
Mm-hmm.
Um, initially the church encouraged masking and so that they could go back to church in person. And so we went, I think twice, but I just wasn't feeling it. I sat there through service and I just, it did not resonate with me anymore. And I knew at that moment that I was not going to come back, that I was ready to walk away for good.
To leave. Were your kids excited about it? Were they like, what was their reaction?
My oldest, I think, was 13, and he was the one who was most discouraged because it was definitely losing our community overnight.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the majority of our friends were LDS. I would say probably 90% of our friends were LDS. And so it is, I don't think the Mormons officially shun people like other cults do, but they definitely do in a more quiet way. They do shun you, and it was like a slow process
How did you
of
build up
kind of.
your community again, Anel? How did you bring how did you surpass that? Because I know speaking to a lot of people that really the real reason why they even go to church is for the community, for that hominess, for that feeling of
Mhm.
family. How did you recreate that? Because that is probably one of the hardest things to lose.
Yeah, so I through homeschooling friends. Initially, it was
Oh,
with there were a few families at church that also homeschooled, and we did things outside of church already. Like there was one family that my kids went to science club with, and they also are a large family. The kids are the same age as mine, and so because we already had interactions and the kids got along so well and we'd known each other for so long, we continued our friendship outside of church. I was transparent about leaving church, and they were okay with that. And our friendship continued. Um, and a lot of our community was rebuilt through homeschooling acquaintances.
okay. Okay. At what point did you move from deleting, I guess, the devotionals, the some of the Mormon teachings and move on to like what you're doing now, which is from what I'm seeing, very earth-based, very secular,
Mm-hmm,
um, very open. There's a lot of talk of like, actual like history, right? Like actual,
mm-hmm,
like I noticed that about you. Like you really dive into like history. You dive in hard to like teaching your kids about processes and systems in the country and the world that we don't typically get in the regular public school or
mm-hmm.
we teach ourselves those things as we go on, right? As we leave college, we leave, high school, we, check out books at the library or we go online and find these different things. But I noticed that you've become super intentional about changing that curriculum and and
Yes.
and I'm amazed, and I wish I would have had that curriculum for my kids. Like I would have sent
Thank
them to
you.
your school. I mean,
Thanks.
if you had a school, that would be the place I'm sending my boys because I on my husband and I are non-believers, so
Mhm,
it's difficult for us to even have conversations with people who are because they don't understand why we do things the way we do them and why how could you ever raise your kids without a belief system,
right.
or how could you ever, like, I mean, it is like you are literally sending these kids to hell where, well,
Uh-huh.
at the end of the day we don't believe in heaven or hell, so we don't think our kids are going anywhere that
Right.
right, so but it's a difficult concept to try to explain to people that that's not that we've never even thought that way for our kids. We ever never wanted that for our boys. How do you handle that? Because that is a high control religion. It's prescribed. They tell you how you should live your life, how you should conduct yourself as a female, as a male.
Yeah, I think it happened in a very organic way as I dove down the rabbit hole myself. I really wanted to, once I stopped believing, I really wanted to understand. where I stood in life as a person without this belief system. And so I went down a rabbit hole learning about Mormonism, and the more I learned, the more I deconstructed not just my faith, but other beliefs, political
Yeah.
beliefs, personal beliefs. And I learned that there was a lot of truths that were hidden from me as I grew up Mormon. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's all I knew. And as I dug deeper, I learned that there were a lot of things that were hidden from us. And that took me further away and deeper into my own deconstruction. And as I learned more, I tried to incorporate that into our homeschooling in an organic way. I first told my kids, hey, I used to teach you this, but now I know better. And
Wow.
I just very openly
That
said
is
it to
so
them.
powerful, girl. That is so powerful because you're building tons of credibility with those kids.
Yeah, yeah. It was hard for my oldest to at first. They were confused for sure. Um, but a lot of it was no longer me lecturing them about what they should
Mm-hmm.
believe, but asking
Mm-hmm.
them, do you
Mm-hmm.
believe this? Remember, this is what we used to learn in church. How do you feel about that? And I learned
Wow.
that my own children, just like me, were conflicted in their own beliefs. Um, not truly believing in heaven and hell, not truly believing that all these things that we were told were bad were actually bad. For example, drinking. I remember on one occasion, I think this was during the first the first time Obama was running for president.
Uh-huh.
And the schools have mock elections, right? So
Yeah.
we did that too at home, and we were discussing it with my nieces, and one of them said, yeah, my parents aren't going to vote for Obama because he's a bad guy because he drinks. And
Oh.
I said, wait a minute, hold on. There are people who drink. At the time, I was still a believing Mormon, but I
Yeah.
said, there are people who drink who aren't bad people. Like, there are
Mm-hmm.
people who are alcoholics, and it's because they're addicts that they make the choices they make.
Yeah.
And I've always tried to, look at things from a more logical standpoint, like be a critical thinker. But
Yeah.
it was things like that where once I talked to my kids, once we left the church, like, hey, do you really think that people who drink are bad people? No, right? There are people who drink that are good people. There are people who drink coffee who are good people. There are people who have sex outside of wedlock who are good people. Like,
Yeah.
that does not define what a good person is. And I
Yeah.
really wanted my kids to understand that their religion previously, or our faith, did not define us as people, that we
Yeah.
could reinvent ourselves, that we could be true to ourselves. And I would have felt like a hypocrite had I been reinventing myself and
Mm-hmm.
evolving without being transparent with my kids.
Wow. And then that is like so powerful because that's the part that I always felt why I didn't want to raise my kids in a church was because I did not want to hinder their critical thinking skills. I didn't want to put blocks in their heads of like, this is how it is, when it really isn't how it is. There's gray areas in so many things.
Right.
The whole black and white mentality for us,
Mm-hmm.
for my husband was actually raised with nothing since he was a baby. I was raised Catholic and our moms were Catholic, so we got married in the Catholic church and we went to Catholic university together.
Mm-hmm.
But I had already kind of left the church and left my belief system like at 19. So by the time I met him, I had already kind of like been done with it. And so um I was like, wow, I connected with somebody in a mental way that I would have never met with anybody else within that church or within the community of the church. And when we got married, and that was like the first conversation, we're like, I don't want to raise my kids with anything. Like, I don't want to raise my kids with anything. Okay, good. And so for me, and now my kids are like, man, we're so glad that you didn't do that to us because, like we feel free, like we feel like we can
Yes.
think what we want, we can feel there's a freedom. Um, and I think I don't know if my kids would ever join a church. Maybe they would. I'm not sure. They're critical thinking kids, but
Hmm.
I don't know. I mean, there's that allure of the community, right? There's that allure of feelingness, of hominess. And so like when you were posting and your change, I was like, wow, I admire that courage in somebody. I admire
Thank
that
you.
sense of like, wow, I'm gonna do this for myself. I'm gonna do this for my kids. And at the end of the day, did your husband was it hard for you to kind of pull him with you, or did he come along? He was like, "Oh, girl,
No,
I was ready for you to just tell me."
no, he came along.
Friends, this is just part one. Stay tuned for part two.